Hello and welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban and I am very glad to have you all following the show. Before we start, I want to remind you that we are streaming simultaneously on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and you are welcome to chime in. This is the beauty of being live with your questions and comments, and we will be able to pick them up, show them on the stream, and answer them, comment on them. That way we make this session as interactive as possible. On YouTube, of course, you can also subscribe to the channel and be alerted if there are new episodes in the future, and be ready to watch from the beginning. You can also join our Discord community to keep conversing around the themes of the episodes, whether we are talking about the theme of today or of those that we had in the past, or the topics that you would like us to cover in the future, because you can also vote on guests and suggest new ones that you would like to see here. And finally, if you find the show interesting, and the content that I produce together with my team valuable, you're welcome to become a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/David Orban. At the various levels available, you can pick the right one fitting your level of interest, and make sure that we will keep producing this in the future as well. So what I want to open with really is how incredible what we can do is with the tools we have today. We are in a pandemic. So many people are still locked in their homes. Those that are allowed to timidly leave are still cautious, but with the power of the hardware and the software and the communication infrastructure that we have, really we are reinventing so many things to experience reality together. And these are the themes that we are going to address with today's guest, Ivo Heyning. Ivo makes new worlds come to life, designing global and playable experiences with artificial reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, XR in general. And she integrates different content networks and channels. And over the course of the past 20 years, she produced dozens and dozens of campaigns boosting civic engagement, improving collaboration, and also helping to raise millions of dollars for great causes. She's the co-founder and CEO of Playable Agency, and I want to welcome Ivo to Searching for the Question Live.
Hi, great to see you, David.
So I like, as we are at the beginning, to ask my guests how they are, and I'm happy to see that you look well, and how they are coping. So how was your experience over the course of the past month or two?
Oh, wow. Well, we've been in lockdown since early March here in Oakland. It has been loud here. There is a lot of social justice energy and enthusiasm and movement in the air. I'm healthy, but pivoting a business right now, especially starting a new business, we started in January 2020. And here in America, starting a business in January 2020 makes it a little bit of a disadvantage. We can't access some of the programs, for example, that other businesses can. So we've had to be extremely resourceful to navigate this time together.
Absolutely. You are connected with us from Oakland in California. And here is Google Earth. I'm talking to you from Bergamo in Italy, which also was famous. The New York Times did a comparison between Bergamo, and New York, which they would have never done before. And let's fly over to your place, which is kind of the other part of the world. There you go.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
for people who don't know, Oakland is right across the San Francisco Bay from the city of San Francisco, and it is a very interesting community, together with Berkeley as well, of course.
It is amazing for art, for food, for film. There's a number of great film projects like Sorry to Bother You and Fruitvale Station that were set here. If you look at Wakanda in Black Panther, that's Oakland. And that's the future of Oakland, being a place where not only do Black Lives Matter, but all Black Lives Matter in this space. And that including all of our immigrant communities. I live in a community that is so wonderfully diverse, and it's Southeast Asian communities together with folks who've lived here for generations, indigenous communities. And this place has become a celebration of that art and creativity. And I've loved living here now for the last 5 years. I also have a business in Los Angeles. I've been in California for about 20 years now. And California is such a rich and fertile place, both for innovation and for creativity.
Am I right? We originally met at Singularity University, but were you also at the International Space University, or I'm mistaken there?
I was not there, but my special effects company has done some related projects. So with my husband, Brent, I had started a company called Toy Shop Systems, which builds spaceships for film and for theme parks, television, you name it, big sci-fi projects. So we had, I think I had originally encountered you both in the space industry and at Singularity.
And of course, just like many others, Singularity University has also pivoted to digital programs. And for those of us who care about its future, it will be interesting to see how it is going to be able to embrace that in a sustainable fashion. Because for so many of the students, the experience of being on campus at NASA was an integral part of the enjoyment and the value that they derived, as well as being able to spend intense hours, not only within the curriculum, but also during the evenings or the nights, to keep talking about the themes that we are all so passionate about. So it is going to be really a challenge to keep that light, or even to strengthen it, because contrary to what was before, now, for example, there is no more any constraint about the ability to have no more than 80 people, or whatever the number was, because in the first class we had 80, then we went, no, the first class was 40, then we went to 80. And the campus couldn't have more than a given number. But when you have a digital experience, there is no limit to the number of people that you can actually include. So I think that is
there's
important.
A limit to the bonds you can build, and that's where we're seeing more and more. It's about the value of the instruction with a teacher, but also the bonds with a group. Having a cohort has never been more important, and having a small cohort that you can actually work with. What we're seeing, even in virtual events, is that people need small groups just for engagement.
So this is called the Dunbar number, which the anthropologist Robin Dunbar formulated, that there is a upper limit to the number of people with whom humans can develop deep and meaningful relationships. And whether it is 100 or 200 or the commonly used value of 150, a question is whether, one, this is true, and whether technological tools can help us overcome this limitation, or improve our context switching, so that if in the past the village and the variety of human experience represented by the village was this limit, today maybe I know 150 people very deeply, professionally, and then another 150 people who are very different from the first for my other interests.
Right. Very small overlapping Venn diagram. For example, you know, the flower of life, which is this sort of nested circle approach. If you can imagine having a core, even just your family and closest friends, that's going to be much smaller than 150 usually for most people. But for some of us, we end up with very wide circles of 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 or more people that we actually connect with. Those aren't deep bonds, right? But we might choose to go to the outer circle for a while, right? Go socialize at Singularity and just be in that bubble for a while and then come back. And we don't lose that connection of the other circle. We just need a place to reconnect to it, right? That's why, you know, the messengers and the groups and the Zoom groups and all of these sorts of things have proliferated, because we still crave that small group bonding, whether it's our alumni. You know, we have like a WhatsApp group that's very lively. Every day we're chatting to each other. I actually had to turn off WhatsApp because my alumni group is so potent and active. So people crave that bond. You know, we are 8 years away from my grad school experience at Singularity, and yet we're still talking to each other every day.
Well, just as we have a hi there from an old friend from Second Life. And it is wonderful to have you here, Malburns. Maybe we haven't spoken for 10 years, and I may be mistaken about it, but welcome. Right. And I'm looking forward to any remark or question you may ask.
David, what is your avatar name in Second Life, by the way? I'm in Kenzo, and I don't know that we ever talked about that, but I mean, that was my career for 6 years.
So obviously, I am happy to disclose that, and I don't assume that anybody should definitely do that, because one of the exhilarating factors of living in an immersive virtual world is the possibility of being somebody else rather than yourself, right?
Right.
As fully as possible and in as a disconnected manner as possible. I am too lazy to do that, actually. So we were about 2,000 people in Second Life when I opened my avatar. And the last name, because that is what Second Life used to do. They issued and retired last names, and then those who were familiar could know how old an avatar was because of the last name. So my name in Second Life, if anybody wants to connect, let me also display that here, is
I had first come into
David Orban Agnon. My first name is David Orban. That is how lazy I am. And my last name is Agnon.
Excellent. I had lived so in depth as my avatar that my Facebook was as in Kenzo for the first 5 years. I was very upset that they made me go to my real name. I didn't want to use my real identity on any social media originally. And being forced to do that kind of went against my desire for the avatar persona to become my primary persona, which some people crave. I certainly wanted to go beyond, like, I like being green. I don't like necessarily being stuck with a human skin tone.
There were a lot of people, and for some of them was really traumatic, because maybe they were living a fuller life online than they were allowed by social convention or the circumstances of their physical world or community, and collapsing the two could have represented real issues, if not even danger, for some. and started in China, adopted in South Korea. The fact that the flaunted freedoms of the West were thrown out of the window by this reduction of identity to whatever is in your passport or ID card is a huge it's a real shame, and
Yes.
and that we are not rebelling against it is also quite shameful. But
I encourage young people to create many avatars and personas that are not necessarily based on their human persona, because the more we experiment with the plasticity of the self, number one, you're putting a lot of different signals out there, so it becomes harder to identify who is this being, because you're evolving over time. The person I was 20 years ago is not who I am now, and we shouldn't expect for people to stay static. And this is part of the problem we have with the way digital culture kind of pigeonholes people over time. It's like you get stuck in an identity that doesn't necessarily serve you. So you have to kind of bust open those avatar personas and the real personas as well.
Another reason why this is especially important today is because we are living times where morals evolve rapidly too, and behaviors that were acceptable 10 or 20 years ago are judged with today's lens. And if we are put in a situation where we cannot distance ourselves from that which we are not anymore and with which we don't identify anymore, then no proper redemption is possible, no proper evolution of behavior is possible, and society freezes, really.
Right.
No experimentation is possible either. So for somebody who is comfortable in their own skin, that may not be a big deal, and a lot of people don't recognize how important this is actually, but especially for young people who still have very naturally to find out who they are and
Right.
what they are comfortable with and what they are not comfortable with. That is really, really crucial.
And we're all doing this, and it doesn't matter if it's for our transgender friends. The Transgender Resource Center, for example, in Second Life became a place where people got support for their transitions. Having spaces like that are safe places where you're not going to be stalked or be subject to risk in the same form. There's always risk to engagement. Interactivity is risky. And so sometimes when we're creating events or communities or experiences, we have to think through those risks before people ever come in the space. And then we have to be in this very proactive and responsive stance with people, so that if there is Zoom bombing and a hate crime and a random thing happening in your virtual memorial, for example, which has happened to us, figuring out how you're going to navigate that with your community together transparently in real time. This is part of the work in creating these safe spaces for people to do that exploration, inquiry together. We don't have enough places for that. We don't have many commons. The social commons, especially now that we've been in lockdown this year, has all but disintegrated. And we know that places like Facebook aren't a healthy commons. And so, you're left with Twitter or these sort of experimental virtual worlds. And that leaves a lot of terrain to remake what the commons can be.
So on the homepage of your startup, Playable Agency, you have a lot of very, very interesting images.
Immersive experiences, yes. We started in immersive, interactive, and experiential. So we're an agency focused both on XR, in terms of VR worlds. This is an artist named Sarah Finn, who has a cast named Dreamseed. And so in this case, Sarah is both painting in Tilt Brush, and her avatar is painting in the virtual space in Neos VR, while the DJs, in this case, Julian Reyes, who is also a VR developer here, is also DJing. So this mixed reality approach where we might have an event, this was our GDC party in March, and we flipped it to become a virtual mixed reality event where there were 4 different rooms and experience zones that people could enter, whether on their mobile phone, on Twitch, or in Neos VR as well. And hubs, which became this very sort of democratized approach. You see my co-founder here, Scott, and he's got this Mondrian hat, right? So he's using the light form, which is projected AR. And I saw your Rubik's Cube behind you. He's got this whole cubatory approach where he's taking Rubik's Cubes and Mondrian and kind of mixing them into immersive experience zones. Whereas here in Neos VR, we've got avatars that are fantastic, right? They're creatures, they're dragons, they're all sorts of wild embodiments. And that's the fun of VR. You can be anything you want, right? That's why we used to go to Second Life, to create these wild, fantastic environments.
And when Second Life was king, a lot of people were dreaming about it being more immersive. But I insisted that the screen didn't really exist, and the 3D nature, especially the ability to create with the avatar in an intrinsic and embedded manner, rather than leaving the world, crafting in another platform like Unity or whatever other engine, and only then going back. This was a very, very important component of Second Life.
Absolutely, and that's where VR came from.
It didn't matter that it was on the screen. The screen basically psychologically disappeared.
Right, and modern day VR, Oculus, for example, what Palmer did was adapting what Nani de la Peña was working on in the lab at the university, right? She was developing Second Life experiences, virtual Guantanamo, for example, I developed with her. And then figuring out how to make that experience as immersive as possible, they had built their own VR headsets 3 years before Oculus became a thing. So that was figuring out, like, how do you take these sort of flat deliveries of a 3D world and make them even more immersive so that people really do get a chance to go fully into the experience, whatever the experience might be. Now, obviously, some people prefer to build in VR and some people don't. Some people get disoriented when trying to build in a fully VR environment, whereas other architects have found that it frees them to do things they couldn't do before.
I worked with Jaron Lanier in the late 80s when the Data Glove and the first headsets were being prototyped, as well as virtual reality as a term was coined. And not a lot of people remember, but his company was called VPL Research, and VPL stood for Visual Programming Languages, because he was obsessed about the need for developers to be more expressive and more productive, and an increasing set of data, in his opinion, could be handled if the visualization and the debugging tools and whatever else came together in this immersive manner.
Right. But the VRML code took, what, 20 years before the commercialization of VR?
Well, and we are still going in these ebbs and flows of enthusiasm and reckoning with reality. I was pitched as an investor, I think a couple of years ago, in New York, a very high quality and very high cost platform for data visualization, which was aimed at board meetings, so that at a board meeting, the board members could absorb rapidly complex data that could be represented in these immersive worlds. And that was all true, except that a high-profile, New York-based board meeting with everybody wearing a headset is just impossible to imagine. It would not happen at all. Absolutely. Not
Except for now when we need to.
well, yeah. Even earlier, from Jaron Lanier, I was working with the company called Dragon Systems, the
Yeah,
makers of Dragon Naturally Speaking,
yeah.
which as an engine is now part of Siri and everything
Mhm.
else. And at the time, the difficulty was that the same kinds of executives that today feel silly wearing a headset were explicitly saying, I don't want to look like a receptionist. I don't want to wear a headset. And those were evidently sexist times enough so that they could afford to say something like that, because only receptionists would wear a headset as they were answering the switchboard. And oftentimes people who are designing and providing very exciting stuff for geeks forget about these details that other people are not like geeks. So
Right.
how do you face that challenge? How do you try to make the things that you design welcoming for not only super geeks but also people who are a little more um, yeah, they are not as courageous in their experimentation.
There's two different approaches. There is either go where the people already are, right? So this is why you see conferences happening in Animal Crossing, you see raves happening in Fortnite and Minecraft, right? Go where people already are, because then you know you've got an engaged audience. Or you figure out how to do something that can go into the interfaces that people have. And most people don't necessarily have a VR headset. Maybe 10, 20, 30% of your audience does, but in general, most people don't have a VR headset. So then you design something that gives you a choice of interface. So I can watch it on my TV, or I can watch it on my laptop, or I can watch it on my tablet or on my mobile phone. And giving people a say of where they want to go as well, because not everyone wants the 3D experience. They might want to watch it on Twitch. When we did the IEEE in VR conference, it was in Mozilla Hubs as the 3D delivery layer. Mozilla has a great open platform that has a cloud delivery service that can scale for events, but it's also designed for both privacy, security. You're able to think about how to bring groups together there in a way that doesn't necessarily work in many other platforms. So while Mozilla Hubs was the 3D delivery, many people, while they were at work or in their university labs, went on via Twitch, because the Twitch deliveries, which were basically Zoom with a wrapper in a stream, basically you're taking the Q&A, putting it around the Zoom call and making a stream out of it. And then you send that to Twitch, and then you bring the Twitch into an environment like Hubs. So with IEEE and VR, we had 100 plus VR rooms. But these VR rooms are available in 2D or 3D on mobile phone or on tablet. So most people didn't choose to necessarily go into most of the Hub's spaces unless there was a reason to be in 3D, like an interactive demo. The poster sessions were fantastic in 3D. And I'm not sure exactly why, except for the intimacy worked between the PhDs. So that was where there was a really fascinating dynamic of recreating the hallway effect in some small place. The hallway effect at a conference, that sort of place where the networking happens, where you get introduced to someone new, is often missing in virtual events. And I think there's been a handful of people, I'm thinking of Kent Bai in particular, who's done a whole Twitter thread about why we need these social spaces, these sort of virtual hallways for a virtual event, a place to come together. And very few platforms have thought about, like, for example, the accidental or the serendipitous meeting versus the actual stream of a program.
And am I right that this other platform, Icebreaker, is about creating experiences that enable people to, well, break the ice and feel involved? So you design little rituals, replace your physical experiences with digital rituals of meet and greet and happy hour and
Right,
and so on.
right. So game show can also be run this way, because what you're doing is you start off in a group that's facilitated, and then you're breaking off into dyads, into twos. And you're having maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes to network or connect with that person, have a bond, and then come back. And you can just keep connecting those. And so they've been used for speed dating, for example, as well as business networking. Hopin 2, which is being used for virtual conferences, also has a networking tab within their platform, and it does the same thing. It basically just matches you with someone to go talk to for 5 minutes. And that's the serendipity sort of engine within the virtual conference.
And it is interesting that a lot of this gains value by artificial scarcity. Just like we are not built to cope with overabundance of food, at least I am not, because I am too fat, I can't resist. Similarly, I gorge on books. You see many physical ones, but I have probably now 100 times as many digital ones, and I will never be able to read them. I trust the AI to be able to recommend them to me. The same with Netflix. And so if the digital event platform is boundless, it paradoxically lowers the value of the human connection that I can form, because it feels easily replaceable. I didn't meet that person. All right, there are 1,000 others that I can meet too. And so those platforms like Hopin that guide you in appreciating the networking, for example, is starting to understand what is this all about.
I think it's coming from a place that is centered in how humans actually bond. After watching a stream for an hour, the last thing I want to do is watch another hour of streams and panels. I want to go have a conversation with someone for 5, 10 minutes. Our brains like to do that kind of processing. And often we think about virtual events as delivering like a broadcast, like a one-to-many or a small group band streaming to 10,000, 100,000 people. And we forget that people come to these things because they want to meet others too. So there's a lot of different ways to roll that out. Figuring out what that's going to look like in terms of how are we going to actually connect? Do we create part of our program for that? Do we gamify it? Do we design some sort of engagement? I'm working on one festival design right now where the whole conference will be a game of sorts, right? Mm-hmm. So then you begin to do these sorts of role play or avatar embodiment or exploration, and that way they can open up the container of their community to new people and new types of experiences. We're all trying to figure out how to experiment right now. I'm meeting later today with a big festival, and they're trying to figure out, well, how are we going to deliver something as magical as our big event? And it doesn't matter if it's large or small, everyone's got the same challenge. They've lost most of their budgets, but they are still charged up to do what they do best, which is create these magical experiences. Streaming by itself is not it. Yeah. It's only one piece of a puzzle. And figuring out what are the other pieces of the puzzle is what we do.
And we see too many events where there is a talking head and you are expected to stay 4, 8 hours in front of the screen, and maybe the event is 3 days long, and the organizers don't realize that the reason events were multi-day events is because if I spent thousands of dollars and the 8-12 hours to go to some place, well, obviously I wouldn't go home the evening. And since that was the kind of investment in time and resources required, they'd better keep me entertained and fed and my brain also filled up with as much as possible over the course of 2-3 days. But now that is not necessary anymore, as well as it is a crazy expectation that I would be sitting in front of the screen that long, especially if I am passive.
Right.
Too many event organizers have not understood how differently they need to think, and how radically the concept of those events have to be redesigned.
Right, because your event might work better as a 1 hour a day for a series of weeks versus 8 hours a day. And you really need to think about, well, what does your audience want? What is the value they're coming for? And what are you asking with them? Is there a participation in process? Because if there's participation, then you've got a driver to engagement. And then you can start to design, how do you work with that?
And another concept that I am playing with is that in too many conferences, yes, you listen to the keynote speaker because you're excited to be live together with the person, but then you are looking forward to the Q&A that is universally cut short because the MC will say, sorry, we are late, we have to move to the next speaker. And you said, but no, please, this is the best time of the whole thing. So now what is possible is to actually deliver the keynote recorded, but not synchronous, in an asynchronous manner, so that maybe 5 days or 3 days leading up to the conference, everybody can watch at their own pace what used to be the content, and then there is the maximum amount of time possible dedicated to interactive Q&A type sessions, and maybe the curation and the voting on the questions themselves, it leads up to the privilege of being selected because you asked the smartest question as voted by the audience or selected by the speaker. And then you can ask the question, and then depending on the answer of the speaker, you can ask a follow-up question. And that
Right.
is something that is really valuable and
And
never
there's
happens.
fantastic ways to just even bake that into the stream. And with IEEE, I liked how we used Slido to do this.
Yeah.
So by using Slido, the questions are right there. Everyone can see them. You can begin to engage that. Even before the question was answered in the stream, people in Mozilla Hubs were discussing the questions. So they're having their own chat and giving each other tips in the virtual space among 20 people that the stream audience may not have access to. They're able to have a whole side channel conversation. At the same time, you're still bringing the best questions to light. So I think there's a number of ways you can use social media and integrate that to your streams. There's a tool we've used called maestro.io. That's interesting because it basically provides more like a professional Twitch with social media and gamification integrated into a white label solution. Something similar here to even what we can do in StreamYard in terms of just asking for questions and taking time for that, but then also creating off a second break-off room later, which we did at IEEE, so that the keynote speaker could go to a lakeside in Mozilla Hubs and 20 people could go ask questions for an hour and like really take that sort of the front of stage time at a conference. When you go and find the speaker afterward, people crave that. They want that. And so just creating a virtual space for that experience is important too.
Talking about questions, Emiliano is asking about next generation devices. Do you believe Apple Glass is going to be a game changer, or it is going to fade like Google Glass
Oh
or
goodness.
other
There
attempts?
are there are 15 good smart glasses on the market now. So we're not going to see smart glasses disappear. Companies are going to come and go. Apple's not going to disappear. How many glasses they sell will be directly proportionate to how do they fit on the face and can you wear them all day. So if they nail that on the form factor, it'll work. And if not, there are companies like LaForge out of LA, Black-owned company in Los Angeles that has done tremendous work in smart glasses and AR. Focals by North. There are a number of other smart glasses that have a wearable form factor. Alternately, you've got so many smart glasses used in enterprise, especially in Asia. And that includes like the View 6, that includes I personally like the RealWear when we're talking about XR and smart glasses for industrial applications, but also for first responders. RealWear, for example, they have a whole development kit that you can build apps on easily, and many of your best smart glasses makers will do this. But you can, for example, put a cam, a heat sensing sensor, a heat sensing cam on top of your helmet. And then your RealWear is going to tell you where the hotspots are if you're a fireman. So that ability to navigate a space based on sensors that you're adding to your heads-up display. This is the RealWear without a helmet, but it's also used in construction or in a number of other sort of critical situations where you need to be able to put safety gear combined to a smart glasses implementation. I love these kinds of opportunity spaces because accessibility can change here. There are so many ways. For example, the RealWear could be very useful for my friends who are paraplegic, quadriplegic, and being able to go back to work. So that's where I'm excited to see growth happening. And it's, you know, Apple's going to be one of 20 companies in the space next year.
And these kinds of experimentations by smaller or bigger players are all fantastically important because Moore's law is not dead. It's not even dying. Mainstream media articles ignorantly purporting that it is notwithstanding. And what that means is that at lower energy consumption, higher and higher processing power is able to provide the software magic that is needed in a form factor that, as you said, can accommodate long hours of power for a glass where the camera or the laser are not even visible. And on top of that, what is incredible is that so much basic research is still also needed, like light guides and the ability to project laser directly on the retina, or the fabled contact lenses for augmented reality, or the even farther out Neuralink type brain implants that are going to be hacking your perception of reality even at a deeper level. And
functional bionic eyes, eye replacement, all of these sorts of things are now being funded and are in development.
Absolutely. So what is next for you and for Playable Agency in today's world? How are you designing the kind of offering where you are finding an MVP or a product market fit with your proposition? Because certainly it is different from what in January you were expecting you would be doing.
We hit pause on one piece of our business plan, but we have kept in development on that piece, which is connecting physical places, gameplay, and any sort of physical object that might, for example, the magic you find in a theme park when you wave your Harry Potter wand and the whole window lights up, right? Those effects can be created in any storefront window. We're at the stage now where we're testing out the integrations to make that work, so that when we do return to physical places, our objects and our devices can be part of vast playable games. And those games, campaigns, virtual events, experiences are built on immersive theater and interactive gameplay. So my co-founders come from both immersive theater and game design, and we've built mobile, social, and event-based games for decades between us. That also includes ARGs and street games and civic games to drive specific social actions. So we're working on a number of deliveries. Some of them are more event-based. Some of them are more sort of campaign-based in terms of releasing a new media project that has toys and experience zones and a game all attached with an app. Those sorts of integrations that bring people into a new world, give them an opportunity to play with that world, and then to create something. The most important thing for me is to unlock new business models for creators and figure out how to monetize a way in which they can publish their own work. And this is WebXR work, this is interactive artwork, and find an audience and build that loop for themselves. Right now, it's very difficult, for example, to publish XR work and even just create a monetization on top of the website. So those are the sorts of things we're testing. For example, there's a project called Coil in the blockchain space. Coil and Uphold connected to Mozilla, we've been able to work out, and also on High Fidelity, testing out ways to add monetization to an experience zone that's all digital. But that lets you tip the artist. If you like their DJ set, if you like their performance, if you like their stream, you should be able to give that money direct to them and not have an intermediary, ideally. So that's where we've been looking at infrastructure, integration, and then how do we design for interactivity based on that?
I totally agree with you that monetization through novel business models is key, because the choke point that all the both traditional and digital but still dominating distribution channels represent is intolerable. The homogenization of culture is a grave danger in our understanding of reality, and imposing a given interpretation of what should be enjoyed and what should be appreciated, what should be rewarded, is becoming accepted by too many, to the point where alternatives are being criminalized just because they represent a channel that is outside of the approved, sanctioned ones. And the best example of this is the fate of Mega Upload, which was exterminated with extreme prejudice, even while searching for copyright respectful business models. And the same fate happened to one of the original peer-to-peer distribution platforms that threw in the towel because they couldn't fight. But we are all the poorer for it. So I very much welcome all the experiments like Coil that you mentioned that want to represent alternatives for creators to earn a living. Yes, please.
At the end of the day, these are the problems we are going to have to solve in order for creators to be resilient enough to survive in this new world. We can't rely on our institutions or our platforms to take care of us. And publishing, taking our publishing power into our own hands, whether that's as a XR creator or a VR creator, a game maker, an event producer, the more of that publishing power you can hold on to, and then be able to work with it over time and build your community with you versus giving it all away to somebody else to operate and to sell for you. Because there is this sort of divide right now. Most artists are not necessarily empowered to publish their own work the same way we do on YouTube, for example. Streaming, we're very used to publishing our own work. And you'll see, for example, what's happened with DJs this year on Twitch. They begin to teach each other how to use these platforms very quickly. Artists share those kinds of tips so that you see new creative platforms emerge. The monetization around how to get that to work and actually pay for the grocery bills is tough. I don't see a lot of artists that are actually doing a fantastic job of making ends meet this way. It's all very experimental at this stage. And part of that is the value propositions don't always match. What we would have paid to go to a virtual club a year ago and what we pay to go to a virtual club now are different. If we had gone to a physical club to go dancing, we might pay 10, 20 more dollars, whatever, currency that would be. And yet in a stream, we often don't want to pay a tenth of that for the same investment of creative talent. So we have to figure out, well, if I can reach a much broader audience, but they're going to pay me smaller amounts, how do I do that effectively? And there aren't a lot of platforms that allow for people to do that effectively right now. So I'm always looking for those opportunity spaces. I think that's why some people came to Second Life 15 years ago, because they saw they could build these sorts of vertical business models based on an open economy, a place where they could actually, work with the systems that already existed.
And one of the reasons why Second Life was so great is because it had an internal economy. It had all kinds of smart ways that content creators could either release their creation for adoption by others, allowing digital replicas, or restrict the digital copying of their creations so that each individual item had to be purchased instead. And it was really unfortunate that the original architecture being centralized could be targeted again, and whether that was for reasons where the financial innovation was perceived as intolerable and unacceptable, given that people could open bank accounts in Second Life and then take out physical money. Danish banks were famous for opening that. So
it changed the economic model altogether. And that's why most of those experiences and experiments went to decentralized apps, because that was the place where they could experiment more effectively, even with a smaller subset of people, but in a way that gave them the most flexibility to run those experiments.
Emiliano was suggesting LimeWire for the P2P platform, but actually I was referring to Napster. And there is this good chart that I found in the meantime, quoting both around the year 2000. And then, of course, we have new ones, Diaspora and Swarm and
right.
Storage and so on. So we are at the end of our stream, and Emiliano would love to have an hour of Q&A afterwards. Emiliano, both Ivo and I are available. We will just let you have our Bitcoin addresses for an
Hit me up on
appropriate.
LinkedIn. I would love to speak to you more. Unfortunately, I do have to go and get on a call to plan another virtual conference for
There you
a
go.
bunch of other filmmakers this time. So it's been great speaking to you, David, and thanks so much. You can hit me up at Playable Agency on any social media too.
So I am looking forward to have our audience do that. And thank you very much for coming. And good luck with the next stages of your invention, innovation, and creation.
Thanks so much, David. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thank you, everybody, for being here together on Searching for the Question Live. You can subscribe and like the videos, both of the current stream as well as past episodes that you can see on our YouTube channel on youtube.com/David Orban. And if you speak Italian, I also invite you to check out our Italian channel on davidorban.com/YouTube Italiano. And of course, if you like the content that I create together with my team, you are welcome to become a supporter on patreon.com/David Orban. And in the meantime, I will see you next time in the next episode of Searching for the Question Live. Thank you very much.